engaging gangs through faith-based intervention. First of all, I'd like to welcome everybody to another session. I know it's been a topic that a lot of people have questioned about. A lot of people have sent me messages saying, Craig, it would be good to share your insights or just deliver a small little snippet of this concept around faith-based interventions, of why it should be used, why it shouldn't be used. Specifically for practitioners that utilize faith to engage with young people that are involved in gang activity. For practitioners that utilize faith to engage young people that are involved in criminality. Young people that are involved in violence. Young people that are also victims of violence. Young people that are also victims of drug, alcohol misuse. Young people that are suicidal. So we're going to look at faith, but more specifically looking at engaging gang members, young people that are involved in violence, young people that are involved in ways of life in which wider society don't agree with and possibly don't like. So we're going to look at that. And for those that are watching via YouTube, when we upload the video, please don't hesitate to send questions. And I will try to get to your questions either online, or I might do a part 2, part 3 or part 4 of the videos to possibly answer some of your questions and possibly to look at. So faith-based intervention. Before we begin, I think it's important that we have a definition and we define what we mean by faith-based intervention. So definition of faith-based intervention: an intervention which affiliates with, is supported by, or based on a religion or religious groups. Now I'm not going to go into the semantics of what religion means from an English context, because that can be controversial. A lot of people might not agree with the term from their faith perspective. So I'm just going to use it as a consensus, so a lot of people in this room and those that may be watching online have an understanding of what it is that I'm talking about. But you can utilize the word way of life, deen, or whatever it is that you use in order to describe your way of living to the religion or the faith that you ascribe to. So with that said, let's continue. Dr. Martin Glynn talks about this idea of a criminal justice pipeline. If anybody hasn't, and people to note down, he's just written a book, a 2015 book called Black Men, Invisibility and Crime. It's a very important book. And I've utilized that book to kind of contextualize some of the stuff that I'm talking about in relation to gangs. A lot of it kind of mirrors some of the things that I've said in previous sessions. But just to kind of set the context, I think it's important. Dr. Martin Glynn talks about this criminal justice pipeline. And as you can see, it goes through 5 phases. It says it always starts with marginalization. People, young people specifically, we're looking at gangs, young people specifically feeling alienated, pushed to the side of society, pushed to the edges of society, feeling marginalized by wider society for a range of different things. He said that then goes into social disorganization. Social disorganization is a concept from Shaw and McKay, for those that know about, or for those that are interested in criminological theory. Shaw and McKay talk about this concept of social disorganization. This concept that when social controls break down, they suggest that when social controls break down, criminal cultures are enabled to emerge. So that when communities are not organized, when they haven't got it together, cultures are enabled to emerge where people that live within that particular community or that particular society can easily become inspired, easily become involved in a range of different things to make a way of living, etc., etc. But due to those social disunity, due to that social disorganization, this is where we start to see criminality, as they say. So from social disorganization, as I've just said, leads to criminality. From criminality, for some young people, leads to gang affiliation. Not all the time, but for some time, for some young people and for some people that live within our community, as many of you guys know, criminality often leads to gang affiliation. And with the postcode situation and young people that are living in a range of postcodes, the repping situation, the young people just want to be seen, whether that's via music videos or via social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, we start to see a lot of these things start to take place, and young people feel marginalized, and because of their communities disorganized, they go to criminality. A lot of them go to gang affiliation. And then finally, as Dr. Martin Glynn talks about, is this concept of prison, that in terms of the pipeline, these are the 5 stages that people end up in. And I would extend that in terms of Dr. Martin Glynn's work, talking about prison, that after gang affiliation, it's not just prison that young people end up. because young people also end up in mental health institutions. Young people also end up going to the cemetery. So but in terms of the pipeline, in terms of what I'm talking about today, in terms of the cycle, this is what we start to see within our communities. So marginalisation, social disorganisation, criminality, gang affiliation, and then prison. Reasons, I've discussed this in a range of lectures before. If you look at previous lectures online, you'll see that when we're looking at the rationale and the reasons why young people engage in gang activity, engage in a range of different things, these are some of the reasons why. In terms of a lot of writings, a lot of research that has been conducted over many years around young people that are disaffected, young people that are involved in gang activity, these are some of the top things that always seem to come up. And it's important that you read. It's important that anybody that is thinking about getting onto this agenda of engaging with young people that are disaffected, young people that are involved in a range of different things, it's important that you read. It's important that you have an understanding of what the agenda is, what the government is saying, what's going on the grassroots level in terms of the community, in terms of statutory organisation, what a third sector organisation is doing, what are parents saying, what are the wider community saying. We have to read, we have to get insight, we have to speak to people, we have to communicate. So in terms of the research, what is suggested is that father absence always comes in at number one of the reason why people engage in criminal activity, why young people involve themselves in gang activity. Second reason why is poor self-concept. Third reason, code of the streets. Fourth reason, effects of incarceration. Fifth reason, community disconnect, communities being disconnected, when we just looked at this whole concept of social disorganisation. Six, people being silent or silences. Number 7 is limited social capital. Now I can break down that in other videos to come if people want that, but just to kind of give you a context, and I said if you refer to other videos, I've actually spoke about these particular things. But in terms of a rationale, we can have an understanding of why these things happen within our community if we look at them a lot more closely. So why are we so afraid to use faith? A lot of practitioners that I speak to day in, day out, coming from religious backgrounds, have strong faiths in a range of different possible religions, whether that is Judaism, Christianity, Islam, are afraid to use their faith when they're engaging with young people. But they know, or they say, that they know faith works because the young people that they've worked with, and these are workers that are coming from probation, youth service, within criminal justice, school teachers, head teachers, people that work within the community, even parents that have an understanding of what's going on within the community, and they acknowledge that faith can be used and faith can be imperative to engage with some of the young people and desist them away from the lifestyles in which they're living. But because of what the media has done, and also because of what some people have done in the name of religion, a lot of practitioners go to work, leave religion at the door, and then go into work and not use their faith. And I understand it, because I see many practitioners go in and out of their workplace and they really know that their faith can be a tool that they can use to engage the young people within their workplaces, but because of policy, because of managers, because of red tape, because of bureaucracy, they can't use this most important tool that is seen to be most effective. And when you go to prison and you see the influx of young people embracing faiths, Islam in particular, gang members, individuals that are or have been well known to bust their gun, individuals that are well known to stab, people that have murdered, individuals that are well known in our community for the wrong things, and faith has been used as a tool to impact their lives and change their lives for the better. However, we as practitioners are afraid to use faith as a tool because of what's been said in the media, because of what people are propagating in the community in terms of ideology, radical ideologies, etc., etc. But we should look at it, and it's important. And for those that are coming from third sector organisations might find this quite important. And another thing that I've also found quite interesting is that a lot of workers that work with statutory organisations or work for a particular service or within a criminal justice team what you found is that those individuals, in terms of a faith tool, don't use it within their workplace, but open up a secondary organisation within the community, possibly from their faith-based institution, to engage young people in the tool in which they know is effective, but they know they can't use it within their workplace. It's interesting, and I'd like to possibly start a debate about that later, and it'd be interesting for those that are also watching online to possibly have that debate about why is that so difficult. So it's important to look at what can faith do in terms of a positive sense. I'm not going to look at the negative things, because oftentimes all we see is the things that faith does negatively. So we see the stuff around radicalization, we see the stuff around young people engaging in a faith and might interpret it different and might react or behave in a range of different ways. I'm not going to focus on that right now, and that might be something, okay, like I said, we can look at in terms of part 2, part 3, part 4 of a session. But what can faith intervention do? For many, in relation to practitioners that have worked on this agenda around gangs, youth violence, have said that faith can support desistance. Desistance meaning that it causes criminality to terminate, to stop. Faith can support desistance. Faith can also build resilience. Building resilience in relation to gangs, meaning when they're in the community they can say no. No, I'm not going to go on road. No, I'm not going to roll with you, man. No, I'm not going to engage in this type of behavior because it's against my faith. And I'm so strong, and the faith has given me so much strength that I know now to say no. And when we look at some of the reasons why a lot of people that are involved in gang activity, it is around those things around poor self-concept, lack of resilience. And again, I've explained this in sessions to come. And when we look at these particular issues, you can see where faith possibly can be used as a positive. Faith can also change one's moral compass and the way that they see the world, and the way that they engage with people, the way that they see their fellow man, fellow woman, the way that they see the world, the way that they behave to their mothers, their brothers, their sisters, to the man that lives next door. Faith can also allow one to acknowledge their purpose. One of the things, if you remember in one of the last lectures that I've done, is that I spoke about this idea of our young people not having a purpose. Why are we here? That most important question that a lot of young people ask, why are we here? And they say, and it is said, that faith can provide people with that acknowledgement of their purpose, why you was created, what is your duty of creation, what is your relationship as a form of creation to your creator. This is what is said when young people talk about desisting from faith. This is what faith has done for them, allowed them to acknowledge what their purpose is and also to act upon the knowledge which they was given. Faith can also create a new platform for those that have been made silent and invisible in the community. Faith can allow them to find that voice. As we've said in terms of Dr. Martin Glenn's work in terms of silences, faith in some cases can create that platform. Faith can also force one to live and do better. Now it can be argued that you don't need faith to do that. But going into prison, interviewing individuals that are serving life sentences, individuals that are serving 18 years, 15 years, 12 years, individuals that have desisted and come out the other end, speaking to them and asking them that fundamental question, what made you stop? They'll talk about their faith, and they'll talk about this idea that the faith didn't only give them the purpose, but it forced them to live and do better with their life, forced them to seek knowledge, forced them to take responsibility of their children, forced them to do better by their parents, forced them to live a certain lifestyle, forced them to take up a job which is permissible, a job that is legit, a job that allows them to make a living, to do for their kids, to do for their families, and to do for themselves better. Faith does that, and it's important that we acknowledge and we look at what faith can do as opposed to just constantly focusing on the negatives. Ibrahim's story. Ibrahim, as I explained to you before, was an individual that I'd done my case study on when I'd done my master's degree. And just to kind of give you a quick summary of Ibrahim. Ibrahim was an individual that was well known within the Birmingham community, in terms of one of the notorious gangs within Birmingham, the urban street gangs within Birmingham. And this is an individual that lived within the inner city, an individual that even when I was growing up, I used to look up to as a role model because of the negative things that he was doing within the community. An individual that was involved in violence, an individual that was quite nihilistic in terms of his thinking, and was exposed to a range of different things from a young age. Never had positive role models growing up, and it's the same type of story that we hear about oftentimes with our young people. But to cut a long story short, this was an individual that was involved in gang activity at the high risk end, the individual that was well known to engage in violence, an individual that was known to be about doing the most extreme to individuals that lived within another postcode or belonged to a rival gang. And this individual was incarcerated for a range of different times, for a range of different offences. And then this individual went on the run. This individual then found faith. Before he got incarcerated, this individual found faith. And this individual, whilst was in prison, was then seen as an individual that was then radicalizing other young people that were also interested in his faith, in which they acknowledged was changing him and his lifestyle. So anyway, just to cut a long story short, that this individual served his time, came out, desisted via faith. This individual turned his life around and is now working within the community and doing positive work with young people that are involved in gang activity within the criminal justice system. A benefit to the community. So that's just the context of his story, but what I wanted to show you was just a snippet of something that he said whilst I interviewed him and asked him that fundamental question, what was it that made you stop? And he said, this is on Ibrahim's perspective, when I was on the road doing my thing, I had no one really. Even when I was in pen, all the people that I thought were my friends were fake. When I was introduced to Islam, however, it was like everything made sense. Every intervention that people tried to use with me never worked because it was short term and I knew it wasn't going to change me. However, Islam gave me purpose. Islam gave me a blueprint in which I could use as a guide to start a new life. So this is an individual that is saying that I was at the extreme end of violence, gang violence, and he's saying that every intervention that was used with me within the criminal justice system, whether that was mentors, whether that was probation officers, whether that was individuals that would come in and deliver workshops and whatnot, he felt that these things didn't work. Why? Because it didn't change his moral compass. Yes, it might have made him think on that particular day, but the day after, he may have been engaging in that same type of behaviour. Because a lot of the projects, a lot of the workshops, a lot of the things that these individuals were doing were only short term. However, it says when Islam came, it made sense. It said it gave him purpose. To suggest that a lot of people that are engaging in this behaviour, as what we've just basically said in recent slides, they don't have a lack of purpose. Islam gave them purpose, and it gave him a blueprint in which he could use as a guide to start his new life. So coincides with what I've just said in terms of what faith intervention can do. It supported his desistance, it built his resilience, it changed his moral compass, it allowed him to acknowledge his purpose, it created a new platform for him to make new choices, and it forced him to live and to do better. And just as a context, it's important that I just kind of highlight a couple of things. That for Ibrahim, his religion as his guide, as it continued to give him discipline and strength, it kept him to stay away from crime. That people that engaged in it and forced him to do right within his community, most importantly, the faith, Islam, gave Ibrahim a purpose and it enabled him to reflect on the impact that his father had on him when he was growing up. Ibrahim believes he was unlucky and believes that it is by Allah that he is here to tell the tale. And he truly believes that if it wasn't for faith, if it wasn't for that intervention of faith, he wouldn't be here to tell that story. And it's important that for any practitioner that is thinking about utilising faith as an intervention to engage with our young people, that it's not just all about getting them to embrace the faith. And I know that is something that is often discussed, predominantly within Islam. You get a young person to take their shahada and everybody's happy, and there's the brotherhood, and there's that welcoming from the community, etc., etc. But we can't forget the aftercare. What do I mean by the aftercare? Embracing the faith doesn't change the social reality of that young person. They're still going to face racism. They're still going to face marginalization. A lot of them don't have jobs. A lot of them have criminal records. So when we're looking at the aftercare, it's important that we look at the things that what these young people need, whether that is economically, whether that's around their social capital, around networks and people that we can signpost them on in order to develop and make choices, whether that is via training or actually finding a job, etc. It's important that we look at the aftercare. So embracing the faith may change their moral compass in terms of the way that they think and the way that they behave, but their social reality possibly may remain the same. And it's important that we look at that. And online, I want us to have that discussion about that concept of aftercare, that once they embrace that faith, what are the things that should be put in place in order to sustain that individual? And it's a two-way process. It can be argued, of course, it's a two-way process. Young people have got to want it. Once they embrace that faith, they've also got to make that step to want to go into the field of work. But one of the difficulties that is often found, that in terms of the discussion that I've had with young people and practitioners, is that even when they embrace the faith, they still have difficulty. So we can't be under the illusion that once that faith comes and once a person embraces that faith, that the issues that was prior to them embracing that faith won't be there. And I'll just go back to some of those things that we said before. It's important. The impact of father absence possibly will still be there. They may have a poor self-concept. A lot of them have to go back to the communities in which has caused the madness, the gangs, involved in a range of different things. They still have to go back to the street. They're still going to be affected by the incarceration in and out of prison. The communities in which they came from might not be forgiving. If you shot someone and if you stabbed someone, the community might not want to be forgiving you, especially if a parent has lost their son or daughter to you. And even though you've changed your life, even though you've embraced the faith, it's important that you understand this. And they still might have a limited social capital. They might only know the man that was in the circle prior to them embracing that faith. So important that when we're looking at aftercare, that it's important that we look at that.